Mike here with Lesson 6 of the Visual Studio 2013 C# Programming for Beginner tutorial series. Now I've got our project file created here. As you can see, I started a Windows format for Lesson 6, and I want to introduce or cover a special way that we can create a console window in all of our Windows form applications from this point forward. What you want to do is, on your project file, which I've called Understanding Operators, and you, whatever it is on yours, just right click on the project file and then go to add new item, and you want to choose a class file. Make sure into the Visual C# class file, and down in the name here we're going to change that to console window.cs. Make sure you type it exactly that way, because I have a special class file with some code in it that I'm going to have you type in there in your file. You'll click add, and that will generate your class file for you and add it to your project. Now, I already have mine added here, so I'm going to go ahead and click on it here. Double click it to open it. And now you'll have something, a skeleton code up there. At the very top where you have all these using statements, remove all the using statements that are there. Just highlight all those, and delete all those, and replace it with a single using statement that I've highlighted right now. It'll be using space system.runtime.interop services semicolon. So make sure you add that. And then if you named your project the same as I did, as Understanding Operators, you'll have the namespace set up the same way. If not, don't worry about it. Just make sure you identify where your namespace is. You're going to change that, and then make sure that you copy. Let me close this window down here. We're going to expand it out. Type in all this code exactly the way you see it. You don't necessarily have to put the comments that I have here, but make sure you modify your public class. It has to be console window, so as long as you created it that way, you should have it. You'll have to add the static keyword before that. I believe by default it just says public class. We're going to add static to that, and so everything in between the curly braces there, you want to go ahead and copy all this down exactly the way I have it. So the best thing to do is just pause the video, type all that down, and get that typed in. I'm going to continue on here so we can keep this video going. So once you have all that typed in, I'm going to go back to our main form here and leave it at this. We're going to discuss a few things now. The main thing this lesson is about is understanding the basic operators, the basic mathematical operators in C#. C# has the common operators that you're familiar with from mathematics: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So I'm going to double click this form here. That'll bring us into our form main_load event handler. Now I already named this form main. By default it's going to be form 1. So you want to make sure you rename your form object the same, and also after you name your form, make sure on the right hand side here, where in the project under that, you'll see a form1.cs. You need to right click on that, go down to the rename option, F2, and rename your form to the same thing, form main.cs, just like we have it written there. So make sure you do that. But anyways, back in our code block here, we've got standard addition, subtraction, multiplication, division operators. So C# has the addition operator, which is a plus, the minus operator, as you would guess, a minus. Now the multiplication is an asterisk, and the division is actually a /. So let me tab those over so you can see. I'm putting 2 slash commas before there just so you can see them. But these are the operators for addition, subtraction, and as you guessed, multiplication and division. And what we're going to do in order to step into that and show you some examples of that, I've got some code that I've pre-written just to kind of speed this whole process up. But we're going to copy and paste that code so that we can show you some examples on how to use those operators. So Control C. And I'll try to have most of the code pre-written when we do these examples to keep the video short. Anyways, going back at the top here, got simple math operator example. Declared some variables here. One for the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. And so we've got int add value, sub value, mul value, and div value for the addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Those are going to be the variables that hold the result of those operations when we do them. Now I also initialize those four variables to 0, and I did that with a shorthand notation that you haven't seen before. I know you've done a single assignment there of taking a literal value and assigning it to a variable, but C# has a shorthand that if you have multiple variables that you're going to initialize to the same value, you basically can do this, and actually it doesn't necessarily have to be the same variable. You can actually do this notation even with other expressions, but you have to be aware of how it reads. It actually reads from right hand to left instead of left to right, and because assignment, when you think about the assignment of statement or the expressions we've talked about before, it evaluates what's on the right hand side of the equal sign first and assigns it to the left. So since we have multiple equal signs here, it's going to start with the rightmost equal sign. If there's no evaluation there, it's just 0. It's going to assign it to div val, and then div val, which is 0, will be assigned to mul value, which makes it 0, and then mul value is assigned to sub val, which makes it 0, and sub val to add val, and that makes it 0 as well. So that's how it initializes all that. Now we have two number variables I've declared here, num1 and num2, and I've assigned them variables or values 12 and 5 to get this started. So on the next line, I'm actually taking these variables we declared up here for the results, and I'm using them in the operator, or the mathematical operator that's associated with that variable. So for add value, we've got add value equals num1 plus num2. And that's obvious. We're adding number 1 and 2. Then we have the subtraction one. We're subtracting num1 and 2. Multiplication, we're multiplying them, putting that operator asterisk in between those variables. And div, we have the division. So that's a simple demonstration there of how you would take two variables, add them together, and assign that result to another variable, which will store the value. And so hopefully that's clear enough in just looking at it, what we're doing there. Now, so we can see that whether this stuff works or not, I'm writing the information out to the console.writeLine num1 and num2 using a method or statement we've learned before, so it shouldn't be new there. And also we're displaying the results of those operators, the plus, minus, multiplication, and division, as you see here in this group. And we've got those listed out. And then we're adding an extra new line at the bottom. Now, one thing I wanted to add, which I probably should have added before we started this, I talked about adding this console window class so we can write to the console window while we're in a Windows format. Obviously, we're running Windows format. By default, there is no console window open. So we have to declare that and set that up. So this is what we should have did before. So if you're following along, just add this to the top here. It'll be we're going to use an if decision maker, a keyword that you haven't seen before. It's called if, and it's checking the condition here, and just put an open parenthesis. C# will put the second parenthesis, and in between there, we're going to type the name of our class that we've added, the console window. Then hit a dot, and we're going to call the open console window. So look for that open console window function and open close parenthesis in there. So you'll actually have at the end there two close parentheses. You'll see there's three altogether, one open, one close, and another close. That'll finish out the set inside open and close. That actually goes with the open console window method we're calling. And this one here on the outside and the one that is on the outside there goes with the if statement. So we're going to say if console window.open console window, and what that does is tries to create the console window. If it's successful, open console window will return a value to the if keyword statement, indicating true or false, or yes, it created it or not. And if we'll evaluate that, if it sees true, then we can do this thing with this open close curly brace, and we'll be able to execute any code in there in our window that's going to write to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to move all this code that we already typed in between those braces. But actually, rather than copy and paste that there, the easiest thing is just to delete this last curly brace here. I'm going to Control C to copy that, and then hit the delete key on my keyboard to delete it. You'll see it's gone. I'm going to go down to the bottom of the code that we just typed, right under this last console, and just hit Control V on your keyboard to paste that in there and hit Enter. And that'll make sure that all our code is between there. And I'm cleaning up some of the extra space. And now, generally, our code would have been indented further in this page had we have typed all that first. So very quickly, I'm going to just start from the bottom and highlight all the code we wrote, including up to and including the comments about the the operators there. And while it's highlighted, hit Tab one time, and you'll see that C# actually indents all that for us. Now I'm going to remove the extra spaces we have up top here. So C# indented that code for us to make sure it's definitely shown that it's enclosed or within the opening curly braces of the if statement. Now I want to add, so just for reference, after this I'm going to hit Tab and put a comment here after this last brace to say that this is the end of if console. I like to know where that last curly brace is without having to scroll back up. This makes a good way to document what that curly brace is for, or what it ends. So end console win dot open console window. So that's the end of that. So we'll know all the code we're going to type is going to be above that line. We don't want to type anything after that. So we've got our examples in there. We've typed this code for these calculations, the simple operators, plus, minus, multiplication, division. Let's go ahead and run that. Let's see what our results are. We've got our window. We're going to move that out of the way for now. We'll make a change shortly that'll keep that out of our way. Okay, so looking at that, the results here in our console window, we've got num1 equals 12, num2 equals 5, and then we have our actual operations there showing 12 plus 5 for num1, 2. 12 plus 5 is 17. 12 minus 5 is 7. 12 times 5 is 60. 12 divided by 5 is 2. And actually looking at that, well, 12 by 5 doesn't really go into 12 evenly, and that's because we're using an integer data type. In C#, when you're dealing with a division, because it's dealing with whole numbers only, it drops off any precision or fractional part. So we're only going to show how many times 5 can divide into 12, and that's 2 times with a remainder of 2 left over, and so it's not going to show any of that. If we did want to, we'll close this. If we did want to correct that so that it does show the correct numbers there, all we would have to do is change these two. We can, just to make it simple here, I'm going to change all these ints to double in our code. And that'll make sure that when it does the calculation, everything's based off a double. We'll get the precision we want. And also, one other change I want to make, I'm going to go to the form designer here. We're going to double click that again. You noticed you probably already noticed, I had these 3 lines that were commented out here. But in this, we call the default constructor for our form main. That's a constructor. A constructor is a method that's called to initialize the form or a class or an instance of a class when it's executed. And so this is and it's always named the same as the class name. You see our class name here is form main, and it's named the same, and it has an open and close parenthesis that's empty, nothing's between it, and it will be listed as a public. We'll get into that public stuff earlier, but don't worry about that. But you'll see this initialized component here. By default, that's put in by C# and the wizard that creates this form application template that we're using. And so we're going to type, after that initialize component, we can then start in code typing some values to some of the properties of the form that we want to change in code, rather than do it through the property box that was on the right side, which if I go back to the form, you'll see all the properties show up. But when we're in code, we don't have access to just click on those. So you can change these in code. Now, since, without getting too much in the class information, in order to use a class, we would normally create an instance of the class into a variable of that class, and then that there is called an object. It would be an object which is an instance of the class form main. But we can't do that when we're actually in our own class writing the code. So C# has a special keyword called this, and this, what it does is allow us to self-reference the form class that we're in, because we can't actually type form main dot and access the properties that way. So because we're actually in the class definition here that we're actually writing code for and defining. So it has this keyword that you can use, and it's not going to go much more into it. Just know that this is the way we have to do it. You type this, then a dot, and you can see all the properties show up that you would have seen in the property box. But anyways, we got 3 that we want to change. Dot text, and the dot text property for a form is in fact the caption. It's at the very top where you see form 1, the label that's up there, or what we call a caption, or the title bar. That's changed by altering the text property of that, and we just set it to our lesson here. And then I'm setting window.state to this form window state.normal. That'll make sure it's a normal window as opposed to a minimized window or a maximized window. Those are the other choices. You can see that if we were just type a dot, or before the other dot, you'll see the choices pop up for that where you can change that. Of course, we want it normal, so we want to have it normal. And then we're going to center it in the screen. Form start position dot center screen, and so you set the start position property equal to. These are called. These actually are enumeration objects, but they're pre-built in C#. And so once you learn the basic enumeration objects, and we'll introduce them as we go, they have these enumeration constants that have been set up as friendly words that you can click and use, and it makes it easier to read exactly what's happening and just by looking at it. But they actually enumerate back to some kind of numeric value that's used internally. So just be aware of that. We'll get into enumerations in a later lesson, and we'll create our own. Okay, so we've with that, you'll see what it does is set the caption of this form window here to Visual VS2013 C# Programming for Beginners Lesson 6 and so forth. And can't really see all that, so we may expand our window a little more. And it also centers that window and keeps it open, normal. Now, it's not minimized or maximized, it's the normal size. So we'll go back to the form just so we can obviously see that text a little better. We'll increase that, but you'll see when it's ran, it does that. And so anyways, I just wanted to touch on that. Now, the other thing I want to discuss, since we've gone into the code, we've seen these basic examples here. I want to discuss a couple of special values that may show up when you're doing division calculations. And I just want you to be aware of them. You don't need to be concerned with them too much, but I wanted to make sure you were aware of them, so if you ran into this problem or seen it, you would know what it is. Now, again, I've got some code pre-written to just kind of speed this process up. We'll go over this code. And so right now it's just an information. It's the NaN and Infinity examples. NaN stands for, and I've got it highlighted there, not a number. So you may have a result where a calculation, division calculation, generates a value that is not considered, it's not a number. It's just not a, can't come up with a possible number for it. You also have this case where sometimes you may wind up with an infinite number that, especially in division, where it just continues on and on and on and on, never ends. And so C# has a special infinity value that it'll assign to that variable. And when it can't come up with a final result. So we've got two examples. This is the first example for the not a number, and it's the case where, so we got two double variables that are of type double. We've got I and j, and I assign them 0.0, and k is going to hold the result of this division. So we're dividing 0.0 by 0.0, and obviously we know if you divide a number by 0, it can't be a number. That's not a valid calculation. You learned that in basic mathematics when you learn division, that any number divided by 0 is just, you usually say it's 0, but it's really not a number. But now 0 divided by any other number is 0. But this is the case where you come up with, now I'm hard coding these numbers here to demonstrate how this could be generated. But generally you're going to be pulling data and information from another source, like the user typing it in on the screen or reading it from a file. So in that case, you really can't expect or control what kind of data values you're getting. And anyways, we'll deal with that in another lesson, how to cleanse your data and make sure that the integrity of the data is there. So anyways, this first example shows that. And let's discuss this infinity example, and then we'll run it to see the results. Infinity does the exact opposite. This is where if you divide 1 divided by 0, 0 can go into 1 an infinite number of times, because 0 itself is not any quantity or any portion of 1, so we know that it could go on forever. And the same could happen in dividing 0 into a -1. You get this infinite response. So if we hit F5 to run that, you see off to the left here, k equals NaN. K was our variable that we had to show, when 0.0 is divided by 0.0, and we get, it's not a valid number, so it's NaN is the way C# will display that. And then the examples of 1 divided by 0, you're not going to get an actual number showing there, and same with the negative. It'll show infinity or negative infinity depending on whether the result is positive or negative. So I just wanted to touch on that to make sure that you're aware of those two special cases when you're doing division where it may show up as an invalid number. And generally you'll do some kind of cleansing where you'll just set those when it's not a number, especially if these variables will be passed on to other calculations that then calculate numbers. You want to check for these results and be aware of them so that you can check for that and abort the calculation if you need to, and not continue or execute any other calculation code, because obviously the results are going to be incorrect or inconclusive. So with that said, that's going to be it that we're going to cover on this lesson. I just wanted to make sure you're aware of the basic operators and some of the special values that may show up for division. We're going to jump right into a little program example here, and hopefully you'll be able to see this. I've got a form shown there. This is the basic form or application we're going to develop here real quick. It's going to take two numbers from the user, and we're going to build in 4 buttons that will provide our addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division functionality, and we'll display the result of those button actions as an answer where the question marks are at. And we'll also build 2 other buttons: a clear button that will clear the form and reset the what we call the blinking cursor in the enter number 1 box, so the user can type another number and start all over again. And we'll also have a quit button that will allow us to quit the application without clicking the X. So that's something new that we've previously been just clicking the X in the corner to close these apps. So we'll start doing that here. Let me go ahead and we're going to delete all this code right here. We're going to leave the if console window, open console window there, because we may need to use that to display any other results to our application. Okay, so we've got that cleaned up. Just want to make sure, and that's another reason to put this comment. We know that was we're deleting everything between it. So this is what you should have left in your form main if you want to take out the extra spaces we can so you can see it better. But in this form main load event handler, the only thing you're going to have at this point is the if console window dot open console window, and then the open in the close parenthesis with our comment after that. We'll be typing any code in there in between here if we need to. I don't really think with us doing the form map here that we'll even revisit the load event. We won't be doing anything in the load event, and you'll see that shortly what we're actually doing. So let me switch back here. I think I didn't bring you back to the right view, but anyway, so I've gone back and I've removed all this code. As you can see, here's our entire private void form main load event handler, and I've just left the if console window open console window with that comment we added before. I've essentially deleted all the code that was between these two braces here, and you need to do the same if you're following along in this and actually doing it in this video. And so we'll just remove that code. Now let's go back to our form. When you get to it, if you have it open, you can just click on the top there to your design view of your form. If not, on the right here where it has the form main.cs with the little picture of this is the graphic that represents the form. You can just double click it and that'll bring your form up. So what we're going to do is build that form that I showed you just a little while ago. So in order to do that, we're going to need some controls are out of the toolbox. You notice I have my toolbox pinned open. If yours is not pinned open, there's this little pin here. You can just, if you click toolbox, if you have it where it auto hides, you'll have to click on that pin button to switch it where the pin is up and down. When it's horizontal, that means it's going to auto hide. So just pin it up and down, and then we're going to just expand out the common controls so we have that open here. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is look for the label, and we're going to drag two labels. Just click and hold the left mouse button and drag those two labels onto your form. Do the same, we'll drop two labels. That's going to hold our text that says enter number 1, enter number 2. And then under that, we're going to have two text boxes. That's where the user enters their values. We're going to click and drag those there, or you can just double click it. It'll put it on the form, but of course you'll have to locate it. So I'm just quickly locating these. And then we're going to add 4 buttons here for the add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Let's grab these buttons. One there, another button, one here, another button, one here, another button, one here. And I'm not going to get into too much of making this look pretty as far as visual design. We're going to just make sure we get the functionality working, and then you can take your time to line everything up and readjust that on your own if you want to make it look better. Yeah, the video got too long when I initially did this, so I've cut out a lot to reduce the time. Okay, now we're going to add another label. That's going to have the word answer in it, and then another label to the right of that, which will hold the actual answer from the calculations of these buttons. Now we're going to add 2 more buttons on the bottom, one for the clear and one for quit. Okay, so now let's start at the top. We're going to, this first label, I clicked on it, and down in the property window here, we want to change this text property, and we're going to call it, just type enter number 1. And then we're going to click on label 2, and we're going to type enter number 2, put a colon after that. Now this first text box, we don't really have to change the text property, it's empty by default, but we do want to change the name so we can reference that in code. We're going to type text num1, enter, and we'll click on the second box, and we'll type txt num2, just like that. Now these buttons, we're going to give them names, and we'll come back and change the caption or text property that's shown on them. We'll just call it BTN for short, and then ADD for that one, for button add. The subtract button is going to be BTN sub. The divide button is going to be BTN div. And then the I'm sorry, that was the multiplication. We'll come back and change that. Button 3 was actually our multiplication, so we keep them kind of in the order that we're doing this stuff. And then this last one is going to be button div. Now, I find it easier when I'm changing multiple properties. I want to change the same property in multiple controls. You just go ahead and do that one after another, because the property window will stay on that property as you switch between controls. You don't have to be scrolling up and down and jumping through that. So that's why I did it that way. Now we're going to do these labels real quick. Well, let's come back to these other buttons. Let's jump to these buttons since we're on the naming. We don't need to name our labels since it's only showing text on the screen. We will change the label for the answer, though, the one with the question marks, in just a second. So this last button is going to be button clear. Oops, I think I capitalized that L. And then this button here is button quit. Okay, so now we want to change some, starting with button 1 here, which is actually our button add. Now we want to change the text. So let's scroll down to the text property and just type add here. Now if we click on the next button, see it remembers we're on the text property, then we can say subtract. We'll go to button 3. This was our multiply button. We'll put that text there. And then button 4, I'm going to type divide. And now this label, first one that's on the left side there, we're going to change that to read answer. And then this label here with the text, I'm just going to put 3 question marks to show that we haven't performed the calculation yet. We're waiting to get that answer. And the button on the bottom left, we're going to type clear here. And this button here, we're going to type quit. So now we've got our form, we've got our basic form here. Like I said, I'm not really going to get too much into laying this out. I'll just quickly rearrange some things just to bring it in a little closer. And I'll shrink down that form just a little bit. I guess with the caption we have up top, it's going to be cut off anyway, so it don't matter. Anyway, okay, so we've got that. Now let's start doing our functionality here. And so the first thing we want to do is we'll program the functionality for the add button. And so with the add button, we're going to take two numbers from the text box that are on the screen, and we're going to add them together and display that in our label here, the question mark, which I forgot to name that. That is the label. We do want to label this label ANSWR. I prefix all these controls with a 3-letter identifier, LBL for labels, BTN for buttons, TXT for text box. That's kind of the naming convention I've used and I've stuck with. Okay, so let's get back to our code. We're going to double click add. So we're going to create 2 variables real quick. Int num1, num2, semicolon. So we've got 2 integers. And then we're going to create an integer for the answer. Answer equals num1 plus num2. So that's going to give our addition answer. Now, in order to get values from those text boxes into the num1 and num2, we simply do this. We're going to type num1 equals the name of our text box. The first one is text num1.text. That's the property we're going to reference. And then num2, same thing, equals text num2.text. So that'll get us our values there. Now the next thing we want to do, and I'm taking this one step at a time so there's no confusion. You see that we're getting this red squiggly line underneath our num1.text. Then if we hover over it, it shows us some information. And the error, if you look under where it says error, it says cannot implicitly convert type string to int. That's because these variables are integers, and this text property is actually a string, and so you can't assign a string into store it in a number variable as a number. So there's a special conversion method that's available with the int data type, and actually any data type, numeric data type that we've discussed so far also has this, and it's called parse. And so what we can do is type right before our text num1.text, we can type int, which is the actual data type the variable is, num1 and num2. Type int dot, and there's this parse function. You see it's highlighted already because it's the most common used. parse. We'll hit tab to let C# automatically drop that in there. And then we'll have to put a open parenthesis. And right before the semicolon after the text, we'll put a close parenthesis to enclose that in there. So we'll do the same for this other one as well. Int parse. What that's going to do is take the text property of that control box, text control box, and convert that to an integer for us. And then we, because it's in an integer format, a numeric format required by C#, it will then have two compatible data types that it can then use that to assign it to num1 and num2 respectively. So that'll fix that for us. And if we just run that real quick, we can see that if we put 5 and 3 and then hit add, well, it doesn't do it. I forgot one other thing. Let's go back. The last thing we need to do is we actually need to take our answer now and plug it into where the question marks are at. So we got that's our label answer was the name of that area of the form. And there's a text property on the label. I'm going to say equals answer. And again, as you expect, C# is going to complain because answer is actually an integer. It's a variable of type int. And text is string. So we're trying to assign an integer type to a string type, and they're not going to jive there. So another function that the int variable type has, and when you declare your variables, you're actually declaring them as a type int or an instance of an int, which int itself is actually a class, and we'll get more into that later. But because of that, by nature, because it is a class, it has this function built into it called toString. And so after our variable name, we can type dot, and you'll see a toString method there that we can hit tab to have it automatically fill it in. And we have to put an open and close parenthesis because it is a method call. And methods or functions always are followed by an open and close parenthesis. In this case, there's no values that we need to pass to the toString method. It knows what it needs to do. It's built into that class definition for the int variable type. So anyways, that'll convert the answer to a string format for that variable, and then we can easily assign it. You see the red line goes away and we're good. So now if we hit F5, type 5 and 3, we know if we add 5 and 3, we're going to get 8. You'll see it changed the question marks to 8, calculated our result. So let's close that. We're going to do the similar code for subtract, multiply, and divide. We'll program our clear and quit button, and we'll test out our form to make sure everything works. So to make this simple, we're going to just highlight these 4 lines of code. We're going to copy and paste that. So the majority of it's going to be the same. The only thing that actually will change there is this line here where we're doing our operation. We'll be changing the operation from a plus to a minus for our subtract button, and we'll change it to a multiplication symbol, the asterisk for the multiplication, and then slash for the division. So let's do that. Multiply. Now, because we're duplicating code here, this is not what's considered the best way to do this, the most efficient way, because we are duplicating code. So for simplicity, I'm showing you it this way. We will at a later date, and we may revisit this on the next lesson where when we get to the point where we can do this, we'll revisit a better way to do this and not have all this duplication of code here. So anyways, we've got our division, click event handler defined, our multiplication, all that's defined. And let's quickly test. I like to test as we go. Do a little code, do a little testing, so we don't have a bunch of problems all at once. So let's put our numbers back in. We always, especially when testing, I always like to have the same input numbers, 5 and 3, especially when they're being used by the same, within the same calculations. We want to make sure we can figure this up and calculate. So doing the addition again, it's 8. If we subtract 5 minus 3, we'll get 2. And that's what it shows, 2. If we multiply 5 times 3, we'll get 15, which it does. If we take 5 divided by 3, again, because we declare these integers, we can expect that we'll see a whole number, not the decimal part. It'll probably just show 1, which it does. It doesn't show the decimal. And so we can fix that later, or I'll let y'all modify that, work on it based on what you saw earlier on how to fix that problem. And if you have problems with it, of course, let me know. So let's close that. We need to finish programming our clear and our quit buttons. Okay, in the form, what we want to clear are the two text boxes where the user types their numbers. You want to clear where the answer is shown, where we originally had 3 question marks and we're putting the answer. We want to reset that back to 3 question marks. And then we want to reset the cursor where it's blinking back to the original first text box where the user can type a number. Because by default, and I'll show you, by default, if we click clear, let's run this. Okay, you see as you type 5 and 3 and we hit add has this little highlighted line around here, dotted line around the add button. It actually has the focus. If I try to hit 5 again, or if I hit 7, see it's really not in the text box. It's actually in the add button. And so that input when I type from a keyboard is actually being sent to the button add, not the text box up there where enter number 1 is. So we'll fix that. When you clear the screen, it will reset all that and bring the cursor back to that box so the user doesn't have to take the mouse and click in that box like this, hit backspace and put a new number in, and that's very un-user friendly. So we want to make sure that we make it as user friendly as possible. So the first thing we want to do is take our text box num1.text property, and we can do this, a double quote, semicolon. What that does is essentially wipe that out and clear that box out. Or we can use, what's recommended is use a string object, and it has a built-in property called empty, semicolon. That does the same thing. That's something that's built into C# with the new iterations, and so we want to use that anytime where we are trying to just assign variables or strings. We can use it on text, anything that has a text property like a control or even another string variable that's defined in your code. If you want to just initialize it to an empty string, you can use the string.empty statement. And so we also want to reset our label, answer.text equal to string.empty. And the last thing we want to do, like I said, we want to set the cursor blinking back in that first text num1 text box. The way you do that is you're going to type text num1.text. There's a method called focus, open close parenthesis, because it is a method. You can type that and it'll reset the focus back there. Now the other thing we want to program is the quit button, and it's very simple. Again, we're going to use the this keyword to self-reference the current form that we're in, since we're actually writing our class code for this form. We've got to use the this keyword to reference itself, and we type this, and there's a close method that we call, and that's as simple as it is. So now if we hit F5, we can test all this out. Hit quit. Yeah, it closes our program. It also closes the console window, you notice, as well when it closes. So hit F5 again. We'll type 5, 3 again. Hit our add, do our subtract, or multiply, or divide, which is still showing 1. And we may go ahead and fix that if we have time here. And now we test the clear out. You'll see it clears out the answer, resets all that, and the cursor is blinking back in box number 1 where we can type 5 and 7, let's say. Add would be 12. Subtract should be -2, which it is. Multiply would be 35. Of course, divide should be showing 0, because it's not going to show the remainder of the fractional part. 7 goes into 5 0 times. It's not, it's less. It's greater than 5, so it's not going to. Anyways, let's quit that. Actually, I did not want to set this to string empty on the. I wanted to put the 3 question marks back in there, so we're setting that back up on the label answer. And the other thing we want to do is let's go ahead and fix that divide. The divide is real simple. Since we have this code in this event handler for specifically the divide button, we're not going to be affecting anything else but what's in here. We can set all these. Declare our variables num1 and 2 is double, and therefore we'll have to use the double variable type pair. See, all these variable types have this built-in parse function. So, all these data types have the built-in parse function. So whether you're using ints, doubles, floats, or shorts, for example. You just have to make sure you use the same data type as parse method from the data type that matches the variable data type that we have defined here. And so now if we run that again, put 5 and 3, add is 8, subtract is 2, multiply 15, now we do our divide. Now we get our answer with the 1.6667, all that, and then we can clear that, which will reset it back to the question marks, reset our text boxes and do all that. And so that's it. That covers a basic form, how to do some calculations and work with some of the controls, the common controls you see in a lot of Windows form apps. We'll get into more of the controls later in future lessons as we go. I'll teach you more of those and introduce some more of those. So until then, that's going to be it. Lesson 7 will be covering default operator precedence. So we're going to continue our lesson with, it's covering operator precedence this time, and some other topics as well I'll slip in there that are related to that. Also, we want to give you another challenge project to go along with this lesson, and this lesson's challenge project is for you to create a program that gets or asks the user for their birth year, and then calculates his or her approximate age using the birth year. And then you'll also have to display the user's age in either the console window that's being generated or on a Windows form. So from this point forward, with every Windows form app we do, or anything you do during testing, go ahead and include this console window.cs class that we've added here. Save this code if you want in your file in a common place you can copy and paste in. And also when you set up your forms, when you first set up the form, you have a blank form, double click it, and when you get in this form load event, go ahead and put this code in here so you have it ready to go. And it will generate, on the load event, will generate that console window so you'll have it open when you're creating a Windows form app, and you'll be able to write to that console window any debugging information or any information we want to use in the future for these projects. So one hint I want to give you to help you with your challenge project is the following, and it's just this line of code here. I'm going to just type it here, but you'll use it where you need to within your code. Is int current year equals, and this is a special datetime class object built into C#, and if you type datetime.now, that gives you the current system date and time, including month, year, and all that, formatted in the default formatting that's specified in C#, which can be overridden. But what we're interested in is it has a year property that returns a year in an integer int format, like a number, and so you can store it in a variable called current year. So that right there will help you in your challenge project when you're determining the user's age by taking their birth year and obviously using it in a calculation with the current year. You should be able to come up with their age approximate. We're not getting the month and day they were born, so we're not going to be that specific, but we're just getting the approximate year that they're old, how old they are based on the year. Anyways, that'll get you started on that. I hope you do well with that, and I will, as we did before, have a video demo showing how to create this challenge project I've just given you, or at least my interpretation of it, and you can compare that against the one you do. So until then, I look forward to seeing you in that video as well as lesson 7. Y'all take care.